Most people walk around thinking the way they feel is just normal. The tiredness that never quite goes away, no matter how much sleep you get. The joints that ache in the morning. The mind that fogs over by mid-afternoon and never really clears. They chalk it up to age, to stress, to just the way life is after a certain point. But in a lot of cases, it is not age. It is what you are and are not eating. Iron deficiency is the single most widespread nutritional deficiency on Earth. Nearly a quarter of the entire global population does not have enough of it, and iron is not a minor player. It is what your blood uses to carry oxygen to every tissue, every organ, every cell in your body. My name is John, and today we are going through 17 of them. And as always, this content is not intended as professional medical or nutritional advice. It does not replace any medication or treatment prescribed by a qualified healthcare professional. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your diet, supplement, or health routine. Food number 1, pistachios. When Jacob sent his sons down to Egypt during the famine in Genesis, he told them to carry the best products of the land as a gift, and several translations list pistachio nuts right alongside almonds among those gifts. That's notable because in the ancient world, you didn't send junk to a foreign official you were trying to impress. You sent what was actually valuable, and pistachios had been cultivated and traded as a luxury item across Persia and the wider Middle East for a very long time before that. Pistachios carry a respectable amount of iron, somewhere around 4 milligrams per 100 grams, and they bring potassium, vitamin B6, fiber, and plant protein along with them. The potassium matters for blood pressure. The fiber and protein combination helps keep blood sugar from spiking after a meal, and pistachios are one of the few nuts that contain meaningful amounts of lutein and zeaxanthin, the same compounds your eyes rely on as you get older. They're also one of the lower-calorie nuts per handful, which makes them a sensible choice if you're trying to snack without overdoing it. Here's a practical tip that actually works. Buy them in the shell rather than already shelled. Shelling each one slows you down naturally, and the little pile of empty shells gives you a visual reminder of how much you've eaten, which makes overeating much harder by accident. It's a simple trick, but it works better than most willpower-based advice. Choose unsalted or lightly salted versions if you're watching your blood pressure, and try pairing a small handful with something containing vitamin C, like orange slices or a few strawberries, since vitamin C helps your body absorb the plant-based iron in pistachios far more efficiently than eating them alone. The only real caution here is the obvious one. Tree nut allergies are common and can be serious, and pistachios are still calorie-dense, so a small handful, roughly a quarter cup, is the goal rather than a bowlful in front of the television. Keep them in the fridge or freezer if you buy in bulk, since the natural oils in any nut can turn rancid faster sitting in a warm pantry than most people realize. Food number 2, spinach. Spinach itself isn't named directly in Scripture. It likely arrived in the region after Persian trade routes opened, well after most of the Old Testament was written. But the people of the biblical world ate wild, bitter greens constantly, and spinach fits right into that same tradition of leafy, mineral-rich vegetables that stretch back centuries. If you'd rather lean into something with a more direct biblical connection, greens like chard and various wild mustard greens served a similar role on ancient tables and carry comparable amounts of iron. A cup of cooked spinach delivers a surprising amount of iron, somewhere around 6 milligrams, because the leaves shrink down dramatically when wilted, concentrating everything packed inside them into a much smaller volume than the raw leaves you started with. The catch is that this is plant iron, called non-heme iron, and spinach is loaded with a compound called oxalate that binds to that iron and makes a good chunk of it harder for your body to actually absorb. This isn't a reason to avoid spinach. It's still genuinely good for you. It's a reason to be smart about how you eat it. Squeeze fresh lemon juice over cooked spinach, or toss raw spinach with a vinaigrette that has citrus or vinegar in it. The vitamin C in both does a genuinely good job of helping your body grab onto more of that iron before it passes through. Lightly sautéing spinach in olive oil for just a minute or two preserves more nutrients than boiling it into mush, and frozen spinach is a perfectly good, often cheaper, shortcut if fresh leaves wilt in your fridge before you get to them. One real caution worth knowing: spinach is extremely high in vitamin K, and if you take blood thinners like warfarin, sudden changes in how much spinach you eat can interfere with how that medication works. You don't need to avoid it, but keep your intake fairly consistent week to week and mention it to your doctor. If spinach isn't your favorite, kale, Swiss chard, and collard greens all sit in a similar nutritional neighborhood and can be swapped in depending on what looks freshest at the store that week. Food number 3, beef liver. In the sacrificial system described in Leviticus, the liver and its fatty lobe were singled out as significant enough to be specifically named and set apart during offerings, which tells you something about how prized this organ was considered in the ancient world, long before anyone understood the biology of why. Earlier generations across nearly every culture treated organ meats as the most valuable part of an animal, not scraps, and modern nutrition science has mostly come back around to agreeing with them. We understand why now. Beef liver is one of the single most concentrated sources of iron in the entire food supply, delivering around 9 milligrams per 100 grams, and unlike plant iron, this is heme iron, the kind your body absorbs easily and efficiently without needing any help from vitamin C or careful pairing. Liver also carries enormous amounts of vitamin B12, copper, folate, and vitamin A, making it one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can eat, full stop. A single small serving can cover a huge share of your B12 needs for the day, which matters because B12 deficiency becomes more common as people get older and stomach acid naturally declines. If the taste puts you off, you're not alone. It's a strong flavor, and not everyone takes to it right away. Try soaking slices in milk for 30 minutes before cooking to mellow the flavor. Pan fry it quickly with plenty of onions so it doesn't overcook and turn rubbery, or grate a small amount frozen into ground beef for meatloaf or a meat sauce, where it essentially disappears. Chicken liver is a milder, gentler entry point if beef liver feels like too much at first, and a good liver pâté spread thinly on crackers is another easy way in. Now the important caution, and this one genuinely matters. Liver is also extremely high in vitamin A, and pregnant women are specifically advised to avoid or strictly limit liver, since excess vitamin A during pregnancy has been linked to birth defects. People with a condition called hemochromatosis, where the body stores too much iron, should also avoid it. For everyone else, 1 or 2 modest servings a week is the generally recommended range. This is a powerful food, but it isn't meant for daily eating. Food number 4, raisins. Raisin cakes show up repeatedly in the Old Testament. Abigail brings them to David's exhausted men in 1 Samuel. They're listed among provisions in 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles, and they were common enough to also be mentioned disapprovingly in connection with idol worship in Hosea. Whatever the context, raisins were clearly an everyday staple, portable and valuable enough to carry on a long journey or hand to tired soldiers in the field, the ancient equivalent of a trail mix bar. Dried grapes concentrate everything the fresh fruit had, including iron, at around 2 milligrams per 100 grams, along with potassium and boron, a trace mineral that supports bone health and doesn't get nearly as much attention as calcium or vitamin D, despite playing a real role. Compared to other dried fruits, raisins land in the middle of the pack for iron. Dried apricots and prunes are roughly similar, so don't feel locked into raisins specifically if you'd rather rotate between a few dried fruits for variety. Because raisins are small and easy to overeat without noticing, a sensible serving is a small handful, not a cupful straight from the bag. Soaking raisins in warm water for a few minutes softens them considerably, which is genuinely helpful for older adults who find dried fruit tough to chew or a little uncomfortable to swallow. Pair a small handful with iron-rich nuts like pistachios or almonds for a snack that does real nutritional work rather than just satisfying a sweet craving, or stir a spoonful into morning oatmeal or a bowl of cereal. The caution here is simple. Raisins are concentrated sugar once the water is removed, so anyone managing blood sugar or diabetes should treat them with the same care as candy, not as a free pass just because they came from a vine. And because dried fruit sticks to teeth more than fresh fruit does, it's worth rinsing your mouth or brushing afterward to protect your enamel. If you'd rather control the sugar yourself, drying your own grapes in a low oven or dehydrator at home gives you the same iron and minerals without any added sugar or preservatives that some commercial brands include. Food number 5, olives. Few foods run through Scripture as thoroughly as the olive. The dove returns to Noah with an olive branch as a sign that the floodwaters were receding. Olive oil anointed kings and priests. The Mount of Olives sits at the center of major events in the Gospels, and the very name Gethsemane refers to an olive press where the fruit was crushed for its oil. The olive tree was a symbol of peace, provision, and steady endurance throughout the Bible, partly because the trees themselves can live and bear fruit for centuries, far outlasting the people who planted them. Whole olives don't carry a huge amount of iron on their own, but here's a fact most people never learn. The black, glossy canned olives sold in most grocery stores get a real iron boost from processing itself. To get that uniform black color, producers treat green olives with a compound called ferrous gluconate, an iron salt, which fixes the color and genuinely raises the measurable iron content listed right there on the nutrition label. Naturally cured olives, like Kalamata, Castelvetrano, or simple green brined varieties, don't go through this same process and carry less iron as a result, but they tend to have more of the natural polyphenol antioxidants olives are best known for in the first place. Either way, olives bring heart-healthy, monounsaturated fat and anti-inflammatory plant compounds to the table, the same fat that's largely credited for the heart benefits associated with the traditional Mediterranean diet. Rinse canned olives before eating to cut down on sodium. Blend a handful with garlic and lemon into a quick tapenade for bread or vegetables, and consider drizzling a little extra virgin olive oil over other iron-rich vegetables, since the fat actually helps your body absorb several other nutrients alongside it. The main caution is sodium. Olives are brined or cured, sometimes heavily, so anyone managing blood pressure should watch portion sizes and choose lower sodium options when they're available at the store. A small bowl as part of a meal, rather than a steady handful straight from the jar, keeps both the sodium and the calories from quietly adding up. Food number 6, lentils. Lentils appear at two of the most dramatic moments in the entire Old Testament. Esau trades away his birthright, his entire inheritance, for a single bowl of lentil stew in Genesis, a decision that's haunted his reputation for thousands of years. In 2 Samuel, one of David's mighty warriors single-handedly defends a field of lentils against a Philistine raiding party. A food worth defending with your life, or trading your future for, was clearly considered worth something real, not a throwaway side dish. Cooked lentils deliver around 3 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, close to 7 milligrams in a full cooked cup, alongside huge amounts of fiber, folate, magnesium, and plant protein. The folate alone is worth mentioning. It plays an important role in nerve function and in how the body makes new red blood cells in the first place, working alongside iron rather than against it. Red, green, brown, and black lentils all carry roughly similar iron levels, so feel free to pick whichever variety cooks up the way you like. Red lentils break down into a soft, almost soup-like texture, while green and brown hold their shape better in a stew. Like other plant sources, lentil iron isn't absorbed as efficiently as the iron in meat, but the fix is simple and tasty. Cook lentils with tomatoes, finish the dish with a squeeze of lemon, or serve alongside bell peppers, and the vitamin C in all three meaningfully boosts how much iron your body actually takes in from the same meal. Lentils need no soaking, cook in under 30 minutes, and are about as cheap as genuinely healthy food gets, which made them a practical staple thousands of years ago and still makes them one today. A bay leaf, some cumin, a diced onion, and a splash of olive oil go a long way toward turning a plain pot of lentils into something you'd actually look forward to. The only real downside for some people is gas and bloating when fiber intake increases suddenly. So if you're not used to legumes, start with a smaller portion and let your gut adjust over a week or two. Rinsing dried lentils well before cooking and discarding the soaking water if you do choose to soak them can also ease digestion for anyone who's noticed beans don't sit well with them. Food number 7, honey. The phrase, "a land flowing with milk and honey," describes the promised land throughout the Old Testament, used as shorthand for genuine abundance and ease. John the Baptist survived on locusts and wild honey out in the wilderness. Samson's famous riddle hinges on honey found in a lion's carcass, and Proverbs repeatedly praises honey's sweetness while also warning against overdoing it, advice that still holds up perfectly well today, several thousand years later. Let's be straightforward about this one, because honesty matters more than hype. Honey is not a major iron source on its own. It carries only trace amounts, generally a bit higher in darker raw varieties like buckwheat honey than in light clover or acacia honey, but nowhere close to liver, sesame, or lentils. What honey actually offers is fast, easily digested energy, a long shelf life thanks to its natural preservative qualities, and some research suggesting its natural sugars may help the body absorb a bit more non-heme iron from plant foods eaten in the same meal, somewhat similar to how vitamin C works, though it's a supporting player here, not the main event. Honey has also been used historically for soothing a scratchy throat and for basic minor wound care, and medical-grade honey is still used in some modern wound dressings today, though that's a specialized clinical use, not a reason to put kitchen honey on a cut at home. Drizzle raw, local honey over iron-rich oatmeal or whole grain toast with nut butter rather than eating it on its own as a snack. One caution that genuinely matters, not a minor footnote. Never give honey to a child under 1 year old, since it can contain spores that cause infant botulism, a serious and medically recognized risk that pediatricians take very seriously. For adults, the main thing to remember is that honey is still sugar at the end of the day, and people managing diabetes or prediabetes should treat it accordingly in their planning, even though it came from a hive instead of a factory. It's also worth knowing that pasteurized supermarket honey and raw, unfiltered honey are nutritionally similar overall. Raw honey just retains a few more trace minerals and enzymes that processing tends to strip out. Food number 8, pomegranates. When the spies returned from scouting the Promised Land in numbers, they brought back pomegranates, along with grapes and figs, as physical proof of the land's fertility and abundance. The hem of the high priest's robe was embroidered with pomegranate designs alternating with golden bells, and the fruit appears repeatedly as a symbol of abundance and beauty in Song of Solomon. It was clearly one of the most prized fruits across the ancient Near East, valued enough to be woven into the most sacred garments in the entire religious system. Here's an honest fact that surprises people. Despite its deep red color and its long folk reputation as a blood builder across Middle Eastern and Mediterranean tradition, pomegranate seeds themselves contain only a modest amount of iron, around 1/3 of a milligram per 100 grams, nowhere near liver or sesame seeds. The color comes from antioxidant pigments, not iron content, which is an easy and understandable mix-up given how the fruit looks when you crack it open. What pomegranate genuinely brings to the table is a strong dose of vitamin C and polyphenol antioxidants, similar to what you'd find in berries, and that's exactly why pairing it with other iron-rich foods works so well. The vitamin C helps your body absorb iron from everything else sitting on the plate alongside it. To open one without making a mess, score the skin into quarters, submerge it in a bowl of water, and break it apart underwater. The seeds sink, and the white pith floats, making cleanup far easier than tackling it dry on a cutting board. Try a salad combining spinach, walnuts, and pomegranate arils. It's not just a pretty combination for a holiday table. It's a genuinely smart one for iron absorption, hitting plant iron, vitamin C, and healthy fat all at once. Pomegranate molasses, a thick reduced syrup popular in Middle Eastern cooking, is another easy way to work the flavor into dressings and marinades. One real caution: pomegranate juice and extract can interact with certain medications, including some blood pressure drugs and blood thinners, by affecting how the liver processes them. If you take prescription medication regularly, it's worth a quick check with your doctor or pharmacist before drinking it daily. Fresh arils also keep well in the fridge for about a week once removed from the fruit, so de-seeding a whole pomegranate in one sitting and portioning it out over several days is a perfectly practical approach. Food number 9, pumpkin seeds. Pumpkins themselves are a New World crop and weren't part of the biblical landscape, so this one earns its place purely on nutrition rather than scripture, proof that the principle behind this list, eating real, whole, mineral-dense food, matters more than any single ingredient being named in an ancient text. The Israelites would have had no idea what a pumpkin even was, but they'd have absolutely recognized the value of a small, oily seed packed with concentrated nutrition. Pumpkin seeds are genuinely impressive, carrying somewhere around 8 to 9 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, which works out to roughly 2.5 milligrams in a small 1-ounce handful, a meaningful contribution for something so small. They also bring substantial magnesium, which supports muscle relaxation and is frequently mentioned in connection with sleep quality, along with zinc, a mineral that supports immune function and plays a role in how quickly minor wounds heal. Roast raw pumpkin seeds at home with a touch of olive oil and salt for a snack with far less sodium than most store-bought versions, spreading them on a baking sheet and roasting at a moderate oven temperature until they're lightly golden and fragrant. Sprinkle them over salads, soups, or morning yogurt for a satisfying crunch that also adds real nutrition rather than just texture. Hulled pumpkin seeds, often labeled pepitas in stores, are more concentrated and easier to eat in quantity than the kind still inside their white outer shells, which most people end up discarding anyway. The caution here is mostly about portion control rather than any serious risk. They're calorie-dense, and it's remarkably easy to absent-mindedly eat far more than a sensible serving while watching television or reading. So, measure out a small handful into a bowl rather than eating straight from the bag. Store-bought roasted seeds can also be heavily salted, so checking the label or simply roasting your own at home gives you far more control over how much sodium ends up in the final snack. Food number 10, almonds. Almonds carry remarkable symbolic weight in Scripture. Aaron's staff miraculously sprouted almond blossoms in numbers, overnight proof of his priestly authority. Almonds were among the gifts sent to Egypt in Genesis, and the golden lampstand in the tabernacle was deliberately designed with cups shaped like almond blossoms, a detail given in surprisingly specific detail in Exodus. Even Ecclesiastes uses the white almond blossom as a poetic image for the hair of an aging person, a gentle, almost affectionate way of describing growing older. Almonds carry close to 4 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, along with substantial vitamin E for skin and eye health, magnesium, fiber, and protein. Large studies on regular nut consumption have consistently linked it with lower rates of heart disease, which is a meaningful thing to know if you're looking for simple, low-effort changes that genuinely move the needle on long-term health rather than fad solutions that fade out after a few months. Soaking almonds overnight and peeling the skins, an old practice in several cultures, makes them noticeably easier to digest for people with sensitive stomachs, and some find the texture more pleasant afterward as well. Almond butter on whole grain toast or slivered almonds over oatmeal are easy, everyday ways to work them in without much effort. Worth knowing too, almond milk, despite the name, is mostly water and contains very little of the actual nut's iron or protein once it's been strained and diluted. So don't count on it as an iron source the way you would whole almonds themselves. The caution is straightforward. Tree nut allergies are common and can be severe, and like most nuts, almonds are calorie-dense, so portion awareness matters if you're managing your weight. A small handful is plenty for the benefit you're after. Raw and roasted almonds carry essentially the same nutrition, so the choice between them really just comes down to taste and whether you prefer a softer or crunchier bite. Food number 11, walnuts. Song of Solomon describes going down into the garden of nuts, and many scholars believe this refers specifically to walnuts, since walnut groves were a genuinely prized feature of gardens across the ancient Near East, valued for both the shade their broad canopies provided and the food they produced year after year with very little maintenance. Walnuts deliver close to 3 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, but their real standout feature is being one of the only common nuts with substantial plant-based omega-3 fat, which supports brain function and heart health in ways most other nuts simply don't match in the same quantity. It's even a little poetic that a walnut, split open, vaguely resembles the shape of a brain, something herbalists noted centuries ago, though it's worth being clear that the resemblance is just a coincidence of nature, not a scientific mechanism for how the nut actually helps your body. Because of that high-fat content, walnuts go rancid faster than other nuts, so store them in the fridge or freezer rather than a kitchen cupboard if you want them to last. And taste one before using a batch that's been sitting around for a while. A bitter or sharp taste means they've turned and should be tossed rather than eaten. Eating the thin brown skin along with the nut keeps more of its natural antioxidants intact rather than peeling it away. Try blending walnuts into a simple pesto in place of pine nuts, or chopping them over a salad for crunch and a meaningful nutrition boost at the same time. As with other nuts, allergies are a real consideration, and the calorie density means a small handful, roughly a quarter cup, is a sensible everyday portion rather than a snack-sized bowl eaten in front of the news. English walnuts, the kind found in most grocery stores, are the variety almost always referenced in nutrition figures, while black walnuts, less common and harder to crack, have a stronger, earthier flavor, but a broadly similar nutrient profile. Food number 12, sesame seeds. Sesame isn't named directly in the Bible the way olives or grapes are, but it was cultivated and used for oil and flatbread across Egypt and the wider ancient Near East for thousands of years before and during the biblical period, making it a genuine staple of daily life in that world, even without a specific verse to point to. It's one of the oldest crops grown by humans specifically for its oil, predating most other oil seeds by a significant margin. Sesame seeds are among the richest seed sources of iron available anywhere, with whole, unhulled seeds carrying close to 14 milligrams per 100 grams. Most of that iron sits concentrated in the outer hull, so hulled seeds and tahini, the seed paste made from them, carry somewhat less, typically landing closer to 6 to 9 milligrams per 100 grams, still a genuinely strong number for any food. Some research suggests black sesame seeds may carry slightly more minerals than the more common hulled white variety, though both are well worth including regularly. Here's a preparation tip that actually matters. Whole sesame seeds often pass through digestion largely intact, meaning you absorb less of their nutrition than you'd think just looking at the label. Grinding them, or simply using tahini or ground sesame, makes a real difference in how much iron and other minerals your body can actually use from the same amount of seeds. Spread tahini on bread, blend it into hummus or a creamy salad dressing, sprinkle ground seeds over roasted vegetables, or try a Middle Eastern dukkha blend of toasted sesame, nuts, and spices for dipping bread in olive oil. The caution worth knowing is that sesame allergies are increasingly common and can be severe, serious enough that sesame is now a federally recognized major allergen required on food labels in the United States, alongside peanuts and tree nuts. Like spinach and other plant sources, sesame also contains compounds called phytates that mildly limit how much of its iron your body absorbs, so pairing it with a vitamin C food, like the lemon in hummus, is a small but genuinely useful habit. Food number 13, dark chocolate. This is the one that throws people off. Cacao is a New World crop, native to Central and South America, so it has no biblical roots whatsoever. The people in Scripture never tasted it and never could have, and most people don't think of chocolate as health food in any sense, let alone a serious source of iron. And yet here it is on this list, fully earning its place on nutrition alone, no ancient pedigree required. Dark chocolate made with 70 to 85% cacao carries an honestly remarkable amount of iron, somewhere around 11 to 12 milligrams per 100 grams, more than most cuts of red meat by weight, which surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. The flavanol antioxidants in cacao have also been studied for their role in supporting healthy blood vessel function and modestly favorable blood pressure numbers, though it's worth noting most of those studies use carefully measured cacao extracts rather than a candy bar from the checkout aisle. The key word here is dark. Milk chocolate dilutes the actual cacao content with sugar and milk solids, losing most of the mineral density that makes dark chocolate worth eating in the first place. So check the label and look for cacao or cocoa, listed high on the ingredients rather than sugar sitting at the very top. Unsweetened cocoa powder, the kind used for baking, is even more concentrated in iron than a chocolate bar, gram for gram, since none of the weight comes from added fat or sugar. A square or two after dinner, perhaps with a few slices of orange for the vitamin C, is a genuinely reasonable way to enjoy it most days. The caution is simply moderation. It's still calorie-dense and contains a small amount of caffeine, along with a related compound called theobromine. So anyone sensitive to caffeine should keep portions modest and avoid eating it too late in the evening if it tends to keep them up. Theobromine in particular is also worth knowing about if you have pets, since it's the same compound that makes chocolate genuinely toxic to dogs, even though it's perfectly safe for people in normal amounts. Food number 14, fava beans. When David's men were exhausted in the wilderness in 2 Samuel, the supplies brought to them included beans alongside lentils, and many scholars believe these were specifically fava beans, also called broad beans, one of the oldest cultivated legumes in the entire Near East, predating even widespread wheat farming in some regions and grown across the Mediterranean and Middle East for thousands of years before refrigeration or modern farming existed. Dried fava beans carry around 6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, an excellent number for a plant food, along with a genuinely well-rounded amino acid profile and substantial fiber, making them a serious source of plant protein in regions where meat was historically scarce or expensive. Soaking dried beans overnight and removing the tough outer skins makes them faster to cook and easier to digest, and they shine in simple Middle Eastern preparations like full medames, simmered gently with garlic, cumin, and olive oil, a dish still eaten as a breakfast staple across Egypt today. They're also the original base for falafel in much of the Eastern Mediterranean, long before the chickpea version became more common internationally. Canned fava beans are a perfectly fine shortcut on a busy day if soaking dried beans isn't realistic for you. Now, the caution here is genuinely important, not a minor footnote. A genetic condition called G6PD deficiency causes some people's red blood cells to break down after eating fava beans, a reaction known as favism, which can cause serious anemia, jaundice, and fatigue, occasionally severe enough to need hospital care, especially in children. This condition is more common in people with Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, African, or Southeast Asian ancestry, and more common in men than women because of how the relevant gene is inherited. If you've ever had unexplained jaundice or anemia after eating fava beans, or know you carry this condition, fava beans should be avoided entirely, no exceptions. And this is worth mentioning to family members too, since it tends to run in families. Even nursing mothers are sometimes advised to be cautious with fava beans if their infant has a known or suspected case of the deficiency, since the reactive compounds can pass through breast milk in rare cases. Food number 15, chia seeds. Chia comes from Central America, where it was reportedly used by Aztec runners and warriors as a compact, long-lasting energy source for covering long distances, and it has no biblical history at all, but it's earned its modern reputation honestly, the same way lentils and sesame earned theirs thousands of years earlier through genuine nutritional density rather than clever marketing. Chia seeds carry around 7 to 8 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, along with exceptional fiber, plant-based omega-3 fat, and a surprising amount of calcium for a seed this small. They're easy to work into a diet because they're essentially flavorless on their own, taking on whatever liquid or flavor you mix them into. The preparation tip here genuinely matters for safety, not just taste. Chia seeds absorb enormous amounts of liquid and expand significantly, sometimes to many times their original size. So soak them in water, milk, or juice for at least 10 to 15 minutes before eating, rather than eating them dry straight from the bag with just a sip of water to wash them down. There have been rare but real reports of dry chia seeds swelling after swallowing and causing discomfort or difficulty in the throat, particularly in older adults who already have some trouble with swallowing, so this isn't a tip to skip. Stirred into oatmeal, yogurt, or made into a simple overnight chia pudding with milk and a touch of honey, they're genuinely easy and safe to enjoy regularly. Increase your intake gradually too, since the fiber load is substantial and can cause bloating or discomfort if you add too much too quickly to a diet that wasn't getting much fiber before. A single tablespoon a day is a sensible starting point for most people, and you can build up from there once you know how your digestion handles it, rather than dumping several spoonfuls into a smoothie on day one and hoping for the best. Food number 16. Flaxseed. Flax is genuinely biblical, just not primarily as a food. Exodus mentions flax crops destroyed by hail during the plagues. Rahab hides the Israelite spies under stalks of flax drying on her rooftop in Joshua. And Proverbs describes the virtuous woman seeking out wool and flax for her household, working it with her own hands. The plant was prized chiefly for the linen made from its fibers, the same fabric used for priestly garments, but the seeds were eaten and pressed for oil throughout the ancient world as well, even if Scripture focuses more on the cloth than the seed itself. Flaxseed carries around 6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, along with one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fat available anywhere, and a class of compounds called lignans, which have been studied for potential hormone-related health benefits, though research in this area is still ongoing rather than settled. Here's the preparation detail that actually matters. Whole flax seeds largely pass through the digestive system intact, meaning your body absorbs very little of their nutrition unless they're ground first. Buy whole seeds and grind small batches in a coffee or spice grinder as you need them, storing the ground flax in the fridge since it turns rancid faster once ground than it does whole. Flaxseed oil, by the way, is a different product entirely. It carries the fat but essentially none of the fiber or iron found in the actual seed. So don't substitute one for the other if iron is what you're after. Stir a spoonful of ground flax into oatmeal, smoothies, or baked goods like muffins and pancakes, where it blends in without changing the taste much at all. As for caution, increase your intake gradually to avoid digestive discomfort from the fiber. And because flax has a mild blood-thinning effect along with those hormone-related compounds, anyone on blood-thinning medication or managing a hormone-sensitive condition should check with their doctor before eating it regularly in larger amounts. Food number 17. Fish. Few images run through the Gospels as consistently as fish. Several of Jesus' closest disciples were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee, the feeding of the 5,000 centers on a few loaves and fish, and one of the most touching scenes after the resurrection involves Jesus cooking fish over a charcoal fire on the shore for his disciples, after a long night of catching nothing on their own. The fish symbol itself, the simple two-curved line shape, known as the ichthys, became one of the earliest visual markers of the Christian faith, used quietly by believers long before the cross became the more common symbol it is today. Iron content in fish varies quite a bit depending on the species. Smaller, oilier fish like sardines, mackerel, and anchovies carry meaningfully more iron. Sardines come in around 3 milligrams per 100 grams, than leaner fish like tilapia or cod, which is closer to what was likely actually pulled from the Sea of Galilee by those fishermen-turned-disciples. Either way, fish delivers heme iron, the easily absorbed kind, along with complete protein, vitamin B12, which exists almost nowhere in plant foods at all, and beneficial omega-3 fats for heart and brain health that most people simply don't get enough of from the rest of their diet. Canned sardines or mackerel are an affordable, no-effort way to add the more iron-dense options into a weekly rotation without any real cooking skill required, and grilling or baking fresh fish keeps preparation simple without adding unnecessary fat the way deep frying does. General dietary guidance suggests aiming for around 2 servings of fish per week for most adults. The caution worth knowing involves mercury, which builds up more in larger, longer-living predatory fish like swordfish and king mackerel over their lifetime. Occasional servings are generally fine for most older adults, but it's wise to vary your choices and lean towards smaller fish rather than eating the same high-mercury variety week after week. That's all 17. None of these foods are a substitute for an actual diagnosis or a conversation with your doctor, especially if you suspect you're genuinely anemic or have one of the specific conditions we mentioned along the way. This is general food information meant to help you make better everyday choices, not medical advice tailored to your situation. But if you're simply looking to feel less tired, think a little clearer and put more real nutrition on your plate. Working a handful of these into your week is a solid, low-risk place to start. My personal favorite, if you would ask me, is probably fish. I really love it. One last tip worth remembering, since it ties everything we've covered together. A cup of coffee or tea right after an iron-rich meal can noticeably reduce how much iron your body actually absorbs from that meal, thanks to compounds called tannins. So, if you're serious about getting the most out of these foods, save that cup for an hour or so later, instead of drinking it alongside dinner. Thanks for sticking with me through all 17. If this was helpful, you know what to do, and I'll see you in the next one.